Before the beginning was God, this God was one. One as in a perfect marriage, one as in the perfect parents, one as in the perfect male and perfect female, one as in the perfect husband to a wife and a perfect wife to a husband. One as in two halves of a perfect whole. This God was never married but always was, always is and always will be. This God is one being with two parts, a perfect male, man, the perfect and eternal Spirit that is invisible, the perfect Father, Son, and husband. And a perfect female, woman, the perfect and ever-present body which is visible, the perfect mother, daughter, wife. This God was null alone in the eternals, and no voice was heard other than each other, nothing existed even eternally other than the presence of each other. Then as one both voices said, "Let us be more than male and female, let us become a father and a mother, and by that and in that become a son and a daughter in them. Let one become many, let us be a family, let our family be as we are, let them be male and female, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, let all that we are be all in them." Then God the Father gave forth his perfect and eternal seed of spirit, and the mother opened her perfect and eternal ever-present womb of the body. This was the moment when God said, "Let there be," and there was. This was the beginning, this was the moment of creation, this was the announcement and arrival of all that was to be for the true birth. This is when light separated from dark, heaven from earth, winter from spring and morning from night. This was the substance, the down, the bed for the true birth, this was the bed and the milk for the children of God. Now that it has begun, now there was a place to give birth, now there was all that was needed for a birth of God's children. Now there was a universe, half spirit and half flesh. The spirit of the Father or the breath, and the flesh of the mother or Eden. A seed and an egg, a passion, a love-making, a conceiving of life. Now this place was ready in preparation and in provision, it was ready in all that was before, and all that is needed after. It held all order and all change, it held all times and all seasons, it held all plants and all animals. It was fed with flowing living waters, it was good. And it was good for only one purpose, the birth of the children of God, and without the children of God it had no purpose. Without the children of God it is an empty house, a silent house. In the center of this Eden was the symbol of the Creator, the symbol of God, the symbol of the divine parents, the divine marriage. It was two trees being fed and watered from the creation of them both. A male tree, the tree of the wisdom of truth, the wisdom of good and evil, the wisdom of that which brings life and that which brings death. The wisdom of the Father, the seed of pollen showering the other with eternal perfection. And a female tree, the tree of living truth, the tree of good alive, the tree of living life. The love of the mother, bearing the fruit of eternal life. Two trees with one purpose, to multiply their perfect fruit, their perfect children. Now was all the time for the birth, now all was ready for God to give birth and all was ready for God's to be born. From the heart of the Spirit and from the dust and the flesh came the first of mankind, the perfect man and the perfect woman, born whole and grown and in perfect union of marriage. Born in the complete image of their Creator parents, born with every embodiment of their parents except the knowledge of tomorrow, the knowledge of consequence. They were true gods, with the power of creation and a free will to choose. They were both born bearing a part of their parents, each of them having a spirit and a body, one of them carrying the seed of the Father, and one holding the womb of the mother. Each of them was half of one complete being, each of them was half of a whole that was only complete by their marriage to each other, each of them was only complete in the presence of each other. Each of them was complete by the naked unashamed and unreserved acceptance and love of each other, each of them was only able to create because of the love that their marriage formed. For without each other the seed has no home and the womb is bare, for without each other they cannot create as their parents do, without each other they are not as their parents are. For in each other is the sound and joy of their children, in each other is the future of love, above all in each other is the power of creation and the generations of God. With the birth of mankind came the perfect family, the perfect parents and the children. A father, a mother, a son, a daughter, the divine family. The reason for love, all of creation expressed in the only way possible, the family, a tree and its soil and a lamp and its flame. Now mankind, the son and the daughter, the Adam and the Eve were born in the heart of the home that was made for them. In Eden, on earth, around the sun, circled by the moon, in the Milky Way at the heart of the universe. There was one continent, one ocean, one spring of water that flowed 4 ways to bath all the corners of the land. There were birds, animals, fish, insects and reptiles. There were creatures great and small in every corner of the world. The creation was blessed and gave forth its blessings. There was only life in all things. Mankind lived in wonder and awe at the beauty they saw around them. All was good, for the family was good. All was good, for the family was one. The family was one, and light flowed and filled all of creation. Mankind was not only the Lord of all creation, but was the only reason that the creation existed, whether it was the smallest part of an atom or the largest star at the edge of space. The creation's only purpose was to be the home of God's children. The creation in itself means nothing. Now mankind is not only the Lord of the creation but is also the channel, the gateway, the opening. The way that the creation is sustained, is enlivened, is replenished. Mankind is the only way and only reason that the eternal substance of the Creator Parents can flow or transfer to and into the creation. The Creator Parents do not love or give life to the creation, but rather they give love and life to their children within the creation, for mankind is in the world but not of it. Therefore mankind, through their ancestry that comes from the Parent Creator and through the sovereignty of mankind's free will, has complete lordship and dominion over the creation. In fact, the creation was, is and always will be at the ransom, beck and example of mankind. When mankind is good, so is all the creation. If mankind is not good, then the creation will follow. The state of the creation is on the shoulders of the children, not the parents. Now comes the other half of the story of origin, the other part of the Genesis. Now comes the part of the story that wasn't good. The part of the story where good left and became absent. Now is the part of the story where the absence of good is made manifest and is seen. Now is the story of death. Now is the story of what death was and is, but most of all what it truly does. For death does not exist, death has no energy, no force, death was never created, death is not part of the creation, death is not part of life, death is not part of the origin or continuation of life. Death is not the destination of life, death in and of itself is unreal and non-existent. For the understanding and wisdom of death is that death is simply the absence of life, death is where life isn't, death is the hole from where life was taken out of. Death is the vacuum of where life used to be, death is merely the shadow where the light of life is not shining. Therefore life is the only thing that exists and death is the taking of life away. So if death is only the absence of life, what can stop life, what can make life absent? The answer was and is the total connection between good and life. The inseparable state that exists between good and life. The fact that good or life cannot exist on their own but always exist in a state of union. You cannot have good without it being alive and giving life, you cannot have life without it having come from and returning to good. Life and good or good and life are one. Now we can see some of the pieces come together. Death comes into being only because life is stopped. Life can only be stopped by stopping that which is good. You can only stop good by stopping that which is good. And the only thing which was and is good in all creation is the divine family united as one. The divine family being one, being good, being alive, giving life, free from death. In this we see the truth that life and good and life are bound in the unity and bond of love between the Creator Parents and their children and the children and their parents. Therefore we can see the fact that death is not real, it is untrue, death is a lie. Therefore we can see death is not life, death is not good, death is bad. Now that we can see truth of the nature of death, we can explain of matter and a thing called sin. We can explain of a thing called sin and how it was used by the and our enemy to make manifest death. We can explain and see how the enemy used the lie of death to mislead the other children of the Creator about the truth of life. We can see how the enemy used the lie of death to oppose the truth of life. In understanding the truth about death and how the enemy used and uses death, we can come to a clear understanding of what sin really is and how sin is connected to death. Now let the other half of the story of origin continue, the half that is unveiled to us in the appearance of death, the enemy and sin. The half of the story that has changed the perfection of the creation to a creation that is dying, the half of the story that changed perfection into corruption. Now mankind lived in their home, Adam and Eve lived in Eden. All of their needs were met and they wanted for nothing. They lived in paradise being one with each other and being one with their Creator Parents. They lived with complete freedom and dominion over all things. They were free to partake of all in Eden except for one thing, the one thing they were warned against. One of the sacred trees at the center of Eden, one of the two sacred trees that represented their Creator Parents. The sacred trees of male and female, one of knowledge, one of life. The sacred trees of marriage. For Adam and Eve came and ate freely from the tree of life, but from the tree of knowledge they did not eat, for they were warned by their Creator parents, warned that if they ate of the tree of knowledge, then they would die. And even though they had no concept of death, they trusted their parents and ate only from the tree of life and left the tree of knowledge untouched. All was good, all was life, the parents and children were one, the Creator and creation were united. All was good, there was only life, nothing was bad, there was no death. All was good and did not change, all was good and stayed the same, until He came. All was good until He came, He who was from the line of God, was from the generations of mankind. He who was loved by the Creator parents, He who was beautiful before God and His kindred, He who once stood before God in glory. He who was these things until He fell from the presence of God, fell from glory, fell from life. Fell and became the father of death, the father of lies, fell because he rebelled against God, against family. He who fell and sought to raise himself up by enslaving all of mankind, by enslaving all of the generations of God, by enslaving his own kindred. He who gave up his divine position and declared war against the Creator parents, declared war by enslaving the children of the Creator. He who gave up his divine position and stepped through time and brought the lie of death to the first of mankind. He who stepped through time and corrupted all mankind by corrupting the first of mankind. And so he came, and there appeared in the Garden of Eden a serpent like unto a lizard serpent with more guile and cunning than had been seen in Eden before. A serpent who was already age-old, a serpent who spoke unlike any of the creatures that Adam and Eve had spoken to before. A serpent that spoke different because in his mouth was the venom of lies, the venom of death. Whereas all of the other creatures spoke only truth, the serpent spoke only lies. This was why it would be so easy to fool Adam and Eve, because a lie had never been heard in Eden before. So now we see Adam and Eve at the center of creation, we can see the relationship between the Creator, mankind and the creation. We can see the perfection of the creation, we can see that it was the arrival of the enemy that brought change. It was the presence of the enemy that brought sin, and it was the lies of the enemy that brought death. Now the cunning serpent waited at the base of the tree of life, for he knew that the woman Eve came there daily in her gathering of food, and when the woman came and began to pick from the tree of life, the serpent quietly asked her, "Are you allowed to eat of any tree within this garden?" And the woman answered, "We can eat of any tree in the garden except for one, the tree of knowledge." Then the serpent asked her, "Why can't you eat of the tree of knowledge?" And the woman answered, "Because our Creator parents have warned us that if we eat or even touch the tree of knowledge, then we will die." Now that the serpent had prepared the soil of the woman, he prepared to plant his seed. The serpent then said to the woman, "That is not true what your Creator parents told. If you eat of the tree of knowledge you won't die, and even more you will become as the Creator is, you will become as wise as the Creator, you will be equal to God." Now the serpent's seed flowed into the woman, now the serpent's seed took root in Eve, took root in her innermost place. Now the seed of the serpent began to take shape. Suddenly Eve's thoughts began to change, suddenly the trust that she had for the Creator parents began to fail. Suddenly the image of her parents began to be replaced by the desires of herself. Suddenly the thought of being equal to God and answering to no one but self became desirable. And so Eve, without knowing, began to become her own God. For with the seed of the serpent came the very thing that cannot coexist with perfection. For with the seed of the serpent came the word that cannot coexist with creation, and that word and that thing is self. So Eve gave heed to the words of the serpent. She did not pick from the tree of life, but instead Eve took fruit from the tree of knowledge, took and gathered the fruit from the tree of knowledge, and returned home to her husband Adam. Eve returned home bearing not only the fruit on the outside, but also the seed of the serpent on the inside. So Eve prepared a meal from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and with her husband sat down and ate, firstly herself, then her husband. And after Adam had eaten, in that moment, in that instant, in that very second that they had not only planned but by an act of will had gone against the warning of their Creator parents, in that moment that they had put their own will above their God's, in that moment that their self-will was made manifest, in the blink of an eye their eyes were opened to self. In that moment they knew they were naked and ashamed, aware of themselves and ashamed of themselves. In that first moment that they knew they were aware of self, the first thing they did was hide from each other. In that moment Adam and Eve hid their nakedness from each other. They also disconnected from each other. They took a part of themselves and would not let the other see it or be a part of it. In that moment they stopped being the image of their creator parents. In that moment the second thing they did was they hid themselves from their creator parents, they hid themselves and disconnected from God. They took a part of themselves and hid it and would not let God see it or be a part of it. In that moment they stopped the power of creation. When that moment occurred, Adam was cut off from Eve, Eve was cut off from Adam, Adam and Eve cut themselves off from the creator parents, the creator parents lost the contact of their children. In that moment the divine family was broken, in that moment the divine family was disconnected and cut off from each other. In that moment the power of creation stopped flowing from the parents to the children and from the children into all the creation. In the moment creation stopped, death began, for without creation death begins. So in that single blink of an eye the warnings of truth from the Creator came true, the lies of the enemy came to pass, and death and sin entered the creation through mankind. You cannot have children of God without free will, you cannot have free will without consequence, and you cannot have consequence without a price. Mankind ate, eyes were opened, a price is paid, and mankind waits to eat again. Mankind hid from their God, but God called out, "Where are you?" And mankind answered from behind their covering, "We are here but we are naked." In that moment God knew the truth that their children had taken their first step. Mankind had taken their first step towards maturity, the first step on their own. Mankind had taken the first step from an infant to a child. Mankind had, without knowing, had decided to leave home. Adam and Eve, through the act of self-will, had cut themselves off from their God and set themselves on a road that led them to knowing, a road to knowledge, a road to wisdom, a road that would take them from being children gods to being adult gods. In that moment God knew that the children could no longer stay in paradise, for paradise was doomed by the death that the serpent had brought, doomed by the death that the serpent brought through mankind. God knew that if the children stayed in paradise then they would never walk to become wise. God knew that if the children did not grow into the maturity and wholeness of complete wisdom, then the children would not know how the serpent had fooled them, how the serpent had used them by making them believe a lie. Now creation stopped and the creation began to die, now paradise is lost and there is no going back. Now mankind can no longer stay at the beginning, because the beginning now has death within it. The beginning is Eden and now Eden has death within it. If mankind stays at the beginning in Eden with death and the serpent within, then death will be forever. If mankind does not walk and become wise, then they will not know that the words of the serpent are lies. If mankind does not know that the words of the serpent are lies, then they cannot choose truth. Mankind let death enter the creation by not knowing the difference between the truth and a lie. They let death into the creation by acting on a lie of the serpent. Now mankind must walk through a cursed land and bear their children in blood, because the land is dying as a consequence of mankind, and the children bear death as a price of mankind. Mankind used to eat freely of the tree of life and knew no death. Then mankind chose to eat from the tree of knowledge and death entered all creation. With that knowledge came separation. Part of that separation was mankind hiding from God. When mankind separated from God, they lost the way to the tree of life. Now they were not only dying, but they were dying with no way back to life. Now mankind was not only dying, but they knew they were dying. Not only did they know they were dying, but they had lost their way back to life. Therefore God cursed the serpent and took away his legs and made him crawl through the dirt all of his days, and God made him crawl and spout the venom of his lies. So God allowed the venom of his lies so that one day, someday, mankind would in wisdom be able to know the difference between the truth of God and the lies of the enemy. Because when mankind knows the difference between truth and lies, the difference between good and evil, then there will be a creation where the serpent, the enemy, is silent. Then there is a creation where there is no death again. Then mankind will find their way back to the tree of life. Then mankind will find their way back by going forward. Therefore God prepared all that mankind would require for their upcoming journey. Therefore the Creator parents prepared all that the children would need for the walk they were about to take. A covering they were given to protect them from all that may harm them from without, and a promise to protect them from all that may harm them from within. A covering of skins to replace the leaves they had made for themselves. Skins that would guard against the heat of the day and the cold of the night. And a promise that shows that although Adam and Eve would toil in a cursed land, and Eve bring forth and bear in blood, that one would come from their seed who would free them from the curse of sweat and blood. They were given a promise that one would come from their seed who would defeat the serpent, the enemy, and grind his head under his heel. They were given the promise that he would come from the line of Adam, the one who would lead mankind back to the tree of life and restore life eternal. They were promised that he would come and pay the price, and be the price of the choice they had made in the garden to eat of the fruit of knowledge, they were given the promise of the Son of God, the Son of Man. Then with a jacket and a promise mankind stumbled forth from Eden. And heaven and earth split and a veil came down marking the line, the barrier between the two. A fiery sword was placed to mark the barrier. The sword was a sign of what was lost. Now mankind walked in soul and body, for the spirit was unable to go back to the heavens. Adam and Eve stumbled forth into a fallen creation, stumbled forth with a jacket and a promise. Now we have seen the story of origin. Now we know where mankind came from, where mankind was born. Now we know how mankind sinned and fell and lost his access to the heavens. Now we know how the divine family was broken apart and separated. Now we know how life was stopped and death began. Now we know that mankind lost his access to the tree of life and that mankind must find his way back to the tree of life. Now we know how two seeds came into the world, one to destroy, one to create. Now that we have seen the start, let us now move on to the journey and destination. Now that we have seen where we are from, let us unveil where we are going and how we will get there. Now that we have seen the problem, let us focus on the solution. We have been shown all these truths in a First and Second Testament. We have been shown the steps of mankind before the Christ came, and we have been given the path to take after Christ came. We can know that the First Testament was mankind's journey from the loss of the tree of life to Christ's arrival. We can see that the Second Testament is the birth, death and resurrection of Christ, and in this we must know that the Third Testament is a map of the journey of mankind with Christ returning back to the tree of life. For there are three separate books or testaments, but when all are put together, the whole story speaks of the journey from the tree of life back to the tree of life. The story of the birth, death and resurrection of mankind. The story of life through death and back to life. Above all, when all three testaments come together, we have the voice of God calling out to their children, calling out to their children who are lost, calling out to their children to come home. When all three testaments become one, they become a single invitation from the Creator to their children to come out of death and back to life. When the three become one, they turn into the love of God. A First, Second and Third Null Testament all becoming one and telling the whole story. Three testaments so all mankind can play their part and speak their piece. Three testaments that anyone's action is as important as any others. Three testaments that all may know that their next choice is more powerful than their last one. Three testaments that all people are equal in the gospel of God. Three testaments so that the voice of an entire generation is not lost but remembered. Three testaments because the story is still being written. Three testaments because the war is not over. Three testaments because we must play our part and fight our fight. Three testaments because we are all authors in the story of life. Three testaments because we look forward as much as we look back. Three testaments so that we do not leave Christ hanging on the cross but rather follow him to the tree of life. Three testaments so that the cross, the tomb and the top of the hill are all empty. Three testaments because Christ's work did not finish then but rather Christ is working now with us. Three testaments because we don't hold Christ to the earth but rather follow Christ past the throne to the tree of life in the midst of the waters. Three testaments because now is more important than then. For now Christ is alive and then is what he did. Three testaments because we hold to what Christ is doing and where Christ is taking us is more important than what he did. Because this is our time and our part. Three testaments so that we can complete the old and begin the new. We are told of an eternal gospel that has yet to be given to mankind, a gospel not unveiled in the times of the First Testament, not unveiled in the times of the Second Testament, not unveiled and sealed until the appointed day and hour, an eternal gospel preached by an angel from the mid-heavens. A gospel heard by Daniel and not understood, and Daniel was told the words were sealed up until the appointed time of the end or end times. A gospel heard by John and John understood, but John was told not to write down but seal it up until the day that the seventh trumpet sounds. The Third Testament, the little book. Sealed by seven seals, uttered by seven thunders, hidden until the seventh trumpet sounds. Sweet to the mouth but bitter to the belly. A Third Testament that is a fresh and new prophecy for all mankind, the Third Testament that comes during the end times, at the appointed hour to all mankind. The Third Testament that when combined with the First and Second Testament becomes the eternal gospel which is the eternal truth of mankind. Where mankind is from, where mankind is and where mankind is going. The eternal gospel for all mankind, every race, every religion, male or female, young or old. The eternal gospel, An eternal message of love from the Creator parents to the Creator children. The eternal gospel, the divine words. Come home. As in the beginning the book of Genesis was the story of mankind's origin, so is the book of Revelation the story of the destination of mankind. John's revelation gives us the truths about events that concern the world and its people during 7 years of tribulations that mark the time of the return of Jesus Christ. The book of Revelation shows how the story that began with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, will conclude with every descendant of Adam and Eve that is saved by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, standing in the New Jerusalem before the tree of life in the midst of living waters. As the book of Genesis shows how mankind lost his access to the tree of life, the book of Revelation shows how mankind's access to the tree of life is restored. The book of Genesis to the book of Revelation and every book in between, not just a random collection of stories that have come together but rather the only truthful record of where mankind came from, what mankind is, and where mankind is going. Therefore we can see that we have the testimonies of the First and Second Testaments to pave the way and to shine a guiding light that takes us to 7 years of tribulations mentioned by John. 7 years of tribulation that is called the last week of 70 by Daniel. We can see clearly that the First and Second Testaments were taking mankind to the time of tribulations, when with the null sounding of the seventh trumpet that a third and final testimony and testament would be given to the children of God. We know that this third testament is sealed by 7 seals and opened by the blood of the Lamb. We know that the third testament is a little book that is sweet to the mouth but bitter to the belly. We know that the third testament is announced by 2 witnesses, the olive trees and the lampstands. We know that the third testament is sealed until the 2 witnesses complete their testimony and the 7th trumpet sounds. We know that the third testament is joined to the First and Second Testaments and in completion becomes an eternal gospel, the eternal gospel. We know that all 3 testaments become a living word that will be written on the hearts of all God's children. We know that the eternal gospel is the complete story of mankind's part in the first creation. We know that the eternal gospel is the foundation for mankind in the second or new creation. The 3 become one, the one is complete and mankind will create again. We know where we are from, we know where we are going and we know what we are doing. We know that the third testament is coming and the eternal gospel will be complete. We will stand up with all those who have come before. We will stand up in our hour and our day. We will stand up and defend a message and a truth that began long ago but lives on in us. We will give our hearts and our actions to the truth that we are from God and we will return to God. We know that Jesus Christ is King of kings and Lord of lords. He is the high priest above all priests. He is the Son of God and he is the first of many. Jesus Christ came and paid a price so that we can be free to follow him. He came not to lead us to a mystery but leads us to a truth that can be plainly seen. We know that we follow Jesus Christ to a third testament, to an eternal gospel and to the truth that he is alive and returning to finish and complete the journey with us. Above all, Jesus Christ gave his life for one reason: to lead us all home to our divine parents, home to our divine family, home to God, home to love. The third testament comes as it was prophesied, the book that was sealed for all time until the day and the hour. The book declared by 7 angels, the book sealed by 7 seals, the book announced by 7 thunders, the book acclaimed by 7 trumpets, the book delivered by the 7th sun, the book for the 7th day, the book of 7 parts. Make way for the coming third testament, the book that has 7 distinct topics, 7 distinct points to make. It is the book that addresses the last 7 issues that are spoken of in the First and Second Testaments but have yet to be understood and placed within the heart of people. It speaks of and covers the last 7 matters that are shown in the first 2 testaments that are holding mankind back and preventing mankind from taking the final steps needed to be whole and complete and return to God and life. The third testament has 7 simple points that seem too simple to change all mankind, but when understood and placed in the heart become transforming, become life-giving.